Owen Riley, a man whose life ambition was simply to be left alone on his own 3/4 of an acre, was a creature of habit. The scent of dark roast coffee at 6:01 a.m., the morning news muted on his vintage TV, the drone of the central air conditioning, these were his constants. They were also the silent casualties of the escalating war with his neighbor, the HOA president Vivian Holloway, today. The routine was savaged by the sound of a fist hitting his solid oak door, a sound that was neither a knock nor a friendly greeting, but a rhythmic, violent percussion of authority. He froze, mug halfway to his lips. 6:15 a.m., too early for a delivery, too aggressive for a friend, and entirely too early for the grim shadow of the Stonebrook Ridge Association. "Open up, Mr. Riley. Final notice of immediate occupancy retraction." "Open the door!" The voice was amplified, echoing with a synthetic distortion that felt instantly wrong. Owen crept toward the door, his heart hammering against his ribs like a panicked bird. He peered through the wide-angle fisheye of the peephole. Two men stood there, hulking silhouettes against the morning light. They wore uniforms, dark gray BDU pants, heavy-duty boots, and tactical vests. Across the chest of the vests, stitched in cheap, reflective lettering, was a phrase that made Owen's stomach lurch: "Code enforcement and public safety." "This is ridiculous," Owen muttered, his hand already trembling as he reached for his phone. The man on the right, built like a fire hydrant and sporting a thick, untidy beard, slammed his fist again. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet morning. "Do not attempt to contact outside agencies. This is a code-mandated action. Open the door or we will employ forcible entry protocol." Owen's mind raced. Code enforcement? They didn't evict. They certainly didn't show up in tactical gear before sunrise. He hadn't received a final notice for anything beyond a slightly overgrown azalea bush 2 months ago. This was a shakedown. This was Vivian Holloway's ultimate tyrannical play. He hit the speaker button on his phone and held it up, pointed at the door. "Who exactly are you and what agency do you represent?" he demanded, his voice thin but firm. The man with the beard laughed, a dry, grating sound. "We represent the legal authority of the Stonebrook Ridge Covenants, Conditions, and Restrictions, Title 4, Section B, Subsection 7. Failure to cure repeated egregious violations. We have a writ of possession." "Let me see the writ," Owen challenged, stepping back slightly, his eyes scanning the living room. "Where was the baseball bat?" "The documentation will be presented after we secure the property, per standard procedure." The second man, taller and impossibly thin, drawled, his voice flat and robotic. "The clock is running, Riley. 10 seconds. Owen didn't move. He felt a profound, cold calm settle over him, the clarity that comes just before a disaster. They were bluffing. Real law enforcement, even a legitimate security team, would always present the paperwork first, especially for an eviction. "You're trespassing," Owen stated, his voice now gaining strength. "I'm calling the sheriff's department right now to report 2 men impersonating police officers at my residence. I suggest you leave my property before they arrive." A furious, high-pitched squawk erupted from the thin man's radio, instantly silencing the two outside. Owen recognized the voice, even distorted by static. It was Vivian Holloway, the self-proclaimed Empress of Stonebrook Ridge. "What is the hold-up code 2? Breach the door, now! I told you he would try to stall. Execute the immediate removal protocol." The beard bristled. The fire hydrant man took a step back, raising his boot, ready to deliver a powerful kick to the deadbolt. "Don't you dare touch that door," Owen yelled, slamming his hand against the wood. "I'm on the line with the dispatcher right now, and I'm recording this entire exchange. You are 1 kick away from a felony charge, and I swear, I will find out who you are and what agency you work for, and I will ruin you. You are not cops! You are hired thugs!" The boot hovered. The tension stretched, a taut wire ready to snap. The silence that followed was agonizing, broken only by the heavy, ragged breathing of the man outside. Then, the high-pitched shriek of Vivian's voice returned, even more furious, overriding the men's radio. "Hold! Hold! Officer Chen is driving past my office right now. I see his cruiser. Retreat! Retreat immediately. Get out of sight! Now, damn you, Owen heard the clatter of gear, the urgent slam of two-car doors, and the squeal of tires on asphalt. They were gone. Just like that. He waited 5 full minutes, the coffee in his mug now ice-cold, his body rigid. When he finally opened the door, the only evidence of the assault was a fresh, splintered crescent carved into the oak beside the deadbolt, and the unmistakable, lingering stench of desperation. A few minutes later, a patrol car did, in fact, glide slowly past his house. It was a legitimate sheriff's vehicle. Officer Chen, a young man with a perpetually tired expression, rolled down his window. "Mr. Riley? Dispatch got a strange 911 call about an eviction attempt. Everything all right? I saw 2 civilian vehicles peel out a minute ago." Owen stepped onto the porch, pointing to the damaged door. "They were wearing fake tactical gear, officer. Said they were code enforcement and threatened forcible entry with a fake writ of possession. They were hired by the HOA president, Vivian Holloway. She's been harassing me for months." Chen sighed, running a hand over his close-cropped hair. "Look, Mr. Riley, the HOA is a civil matter. I can file a report for damage to property and trespassing, but I can't intervene in their internal procedures. I can tell you, though," he paused, lowering his voice, "we get calls about Vivian Holloway all the time. But the description you gave, tactical gear? That's excessive. They sound like private security trying to play cop. If they come back, do not engage. Call us immediately." After Chen left, Owen felt a wave of nausea and rage. It wasn't just the violation. It was the audacious illegality of it. He had to stop her. But how? He had fought every fine, every lien, every ridiculous cease and desist for a non-approved patio umbrella. Nothing had worked. She simply had more resources and more sheer, unadulterated malice. He stormed back inside, needing to ground himself in something real, something solid. He went to his study, pulling out the massive, fire-rated safe where he kept his most important documents. He pulled out the thick, vellum-like sheaf of papers, the original deeds, surveys, and plats passed down to him when he inherited the house from his eccentric grandfather, Thomas Riley. "She wants to evict me?" Owen snarled, running a finger over the heavily embossed seal of the 1952 county surveyor's office. "I'll see her in hell first." He didn't need to review the property lines. He had them memorized. His land, Lot 14, was a perfect rectangle. The common area, Lot 15, which contained the Stonebrook Ridge Association Management Office, was immediately adjacent to his back perimeter. He spread the enormous, brittle map out on the table, securing the corners with heavy paperweights. The original survey, commissioned by his grandfather, showed the exact boundary, a line of small, hand-drawn symbols denoting the original iron pins sunk into the ground. The Stonebrook Ridge Association Management Office, the seat of Vivian's power, was a low, ugly, cinder block building that had been erected in the early 90s, shortly after the subdivision was developed. It sat right up against his back boundary, separated from his property only by a thin, patchy strip of shared turf and a waist-high chain-link fence that Owen always maintained. He traced the property line of Lot 14 with a skeptical finger. It ran perfectly straight, ending exactly where the old fence stood. Then he looked closer. Much closer. His grandfather, a retired civil engineer who trusted no one, had painstakingly cross-referenced every survey line with county records. Next to the main diagram, Thomas Riley had penned an enormous, detailed addendum A in precise, spidery handwriting, noting a discrepancy discovered during the subdivision's original platting. Owen's breath hitched. He leaned in, his eyes darting between the thick inked line of the 1952 plat and the hand-drawn corrections in the addendum. His lot, Lot 14, was indeed a perfect rectangle, but the original survey markers, which had been moved during a later road expansion, placed the eastern boundary, the one bordering the common area, 6 feet further east than the current visible fence line. 6 feet. Along a 60-foot stretch of boundary, Owen followed the original true boundary line on the map. The common area, Lot 15, began at that line. He stood up so fast his chair crashed backward. He stared at the map, then back out the window toward the HOA office building, visible through the trees. The cinderblock structure was imposing, wide and deep. He knew its dimensions. He'd looked them up out of spite when Vivian had fined him for his mailbox height. He grabbed a tape measure from the desk and rushed outside, moving along the back fence. The current fence was barely 2 feet from the wall of the HOA office building. 6 feet, the addendum screamed. If the true property line was 6 feet further east, and the HOA office wall was only 2 feet from the current incorrect line. Owen began to pace the numbers in his head. The building's footprint, the fence, the 8 feet of difference. A cold, exhilarating rush flooded his system, banishing the earlier fear and nausea. He rushed back inside, back to the addendum, and found the highlighted sentence, underlined 3 times in red ink by his grandfather. The corner pin, Lot 1415, is located 4 feet inside the Western Foundation W. The offices of Elias Vance, attorney at law, were located not in the manicured glass and steel towers of the downtown financial district, but on the 5th floor of a dusty, brutalist building overlooking the county courthouse. Elias Vance did not deal in mergers and acquisitions. He dealt in blood and soil, land, water, boundaries, the eternal, brutal truths of property law. Vance was a man constructed entirely of sharp angles, sharp jaw, sharp eyes, and the sharp, slightly metallic smell of a man who worked too hard. He wore a rumpled, expensive suit and greeted Owen with a gesture that was half handshake, half command to sit down. "Riley," Vance said. Not a question, but a confirmation. He didn't offer coffee or pleasantries. "You said you have documentation proving the Stonebrook Ridge Association Management Office is built 4 feet onto your property. That's a hell of a claim. Most people who call me about HOAs are complaining about bird feeders." Owen didn't waste time. He slid the ancient vellum deed and the addendum A plat map across the scarred mahogany desk. "My grandfather was Thomas Riley, a civil engineer." He wasn't subtle. "Look at the red ink." Vance didn't immediately touch the documents. He picked up a pair of heavy, tortoise-shell reading glasses, settled them on his nose, and then finally began to examine the evidence. The silence in the room was thick, broken only by the scratch of Vance's nail tracing the delicate, faded lines of the 1952 Platot. Vance spent a full 15 minutes cross-referencing the lot dimensions, the parcel ID, and Thomas Riley's meticulously penned notes against the original county zoning codes Owen had brought. As he worked, the cynical, exhausted mask of the lawyer began to crack, replaced by a glint of genuine professional excitement. "My God," Vance murmured, leaning back. "Your grandfather was either a paranoid genius or a prophet. He not only identified the corner pin displacement from the 68 road expansion, but he explicitly documented the encroachment. He anticipated this decades ago." Vance slapped the desk, the sound startling Owen. "This isn't a dispute over lawn care. Riley, this is a claim for quiet title and trespass, with punitive damages tied to a criminal impersonation attempt. They sent fake police to evict you? On the morning they were actively sitting on your land?" Vance's smile was predatory. "That's poetic. That's a career-defining case right there." Owen felt a genuine surge of hope, the first he'd felt in years. "What do we do? I want that building off my property. I want her to suffer." "Slow down," Vance cautioned, holding up a hand. "Revenge is a dish best served with maximum legal adherence. We can't just send a letter. We have to make this surgically precise. They are the HOA. They think they are the law. We are going to treat them like squatters, because that's what they are." Vance dictated the strategy, mapping it out on a legal pad with aggressive, angular strokes. "First, we file 2 actions today. A quiet title, action based on these documents, which legally forces the court to declare the true boundary, and second, an action in trespass demanding immediate removal of the structure, or failing that, substantial leaseback penalties. This is all quiet, filed directly with the court. Second," Vance continued, "we deliver the notice of intent to sue to the HOA, not through their lawyer, but personally to Vivian Holloway at the office itself. We will include a copy of the Addendum A and a demand for immediate access for a new independent survey crew. This delivery will be our opening salvo." "She will panic," Owen breathed, visualizing Vivian's reaction. "She will rage," Vance corrected. "And that's what we want. We need her to make a mistake. She has two defenses. One, that this deed is invalid due to a statute of limitations like adverse possession, meaning they've occupied the land for so long, it's legally theirs. Two, estoppel, claiming you allowed them to build there, so you can't now change your mind. My grandfather noted the encroachment in 1993, 2 years after the building went up, and filed that addendum with the county, preserving the claim. He died before he acted on it, Owen countered, citing his homework. She can't claim adverse possession if the owner filed a claim, even if it was just an addendum that preserves his interest. Vance nodded slowly, impressed. Good, you're ready for this fight. Here's the fun part. The court documents go out today. Tomorrow, you will personally deliver the notice of intent. You will not argue. You will not yell. You will simply present the documents and state one single, perfect sentence. You are illegally occupying my property, and your time is up. The next morning, the air over Stonebrook Ridge was thick with humidity and the smell of freshly mown grass, the perfect suburban tableau of peace covering a deep, poisonous rot. Owen parked his truck, not on the curb, but directly in the tiny, asphalt driveway of the Stonebrook Ridge Association Management Office. He was dressed in a dark suit, clothes he hadn't worn since his last court appearance over the mailbox height, and he carried a briefcase containing a thick, ribbon-tied bundle of legally filed documents. The gold-plated sign on the cinder-block wall seemed to mock him, shining in the sun. He reached down to the asphalt, finding the small, faint X that marked the true original corner of Lot 14, the point 4 feet inside the building's foundation. He took a deep, steadying breath and walked to the door. Vivian Holloway was exactly where he expected her to be, seated behind a massive, dark wood desk, acting as queen of the 3-room domain. She was a woman who weaponized beige. Everything about her, her tailored jacket, her tightly pulled blonde hair, the air-conditioned sterility of the office, was an act of control. She looked up, saw Owen, and her face tightened into a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. You have a breathtaking lack of self-awareness. Mr. Riley, she hissed, her voice cutting through the silence. To show your face here after having armed men retreat from your premises? The board is meeting right now to file a police report against you for false reporting and harassment. It's not armed men. Vivian, Owen said, his voice calm, low, and steady. Vance's lesson in measured escalation sinking in. It's 2 thugs you paid to commit a felony on my property. They impersonated law enforcement. That's a criminal issue, not an HOA one. He walked right up to her desk, ignoring the secretary, a terrified college intern named Sarah, who was attempting to intercept him. He placed the heavy legal documents on her mahogany desk. The thump echoed in the room. Vivian didn't touch them. She looked at the ribbon, then at Owen. What is this? Another rambling complaint about the communal dumpster odor? Get out of my office or I will call security. Call them, Owen invited, his eyes burning into hers. Just make sure they walk over this desk to get to me, because everything past this point is an illegal maneuver on your part. He paused, letting the silence stretch, the tension thick and suffocating. He watched her control struggle, the tremor in her hand as she reached for her gilded pen. This is a notice of intent to sue, Vivian, Owen explained, leaning slightly on the desk, forcing her gaze. Specifically, an action in trespass and quiet title for parcel ID 4901B. Included is a certified copy of my grandfather's Addendum A to the 1952 plat. It confirms that the western foundation of this building, the Stonebrook Ridge Association Management Office, encroaches 4 feet onto my property, Lot 14. Vivian froze. The color drained from her face, leaving only the sharp, unpleasant pink of panic. She hadn't expected this. She had expected to discuss his mailbox, his fence, his life. She hadn't expected a structural, existential challenge to her fortress. That's a lie, she stammered, grabbing the documents, her eyes scanning the first page frantically. A forged document. This is common area established by the developer decades ago. We've had surveys. You've had new surveys based on new markers, Owen corrected, his victory palpable. Markers that were illegally moved. My grandfather preserved the original claim. This building is a trespass, Vivian. You, your files, your desk, your gold-plated sign, and everything you use to harass the neighborhood is sitting on my land. He dropped the line Vance had given him. The one single perfect sentence, delivered like the hammer blow of a judge's gavel. You are illegally occupying my property, and your time is up. He turned and walked out, leaving the stunned silence and the sound of Vivian's ragged, panicked exhale behind him. That evening, the retaliation was swift and targeted. It wasn't fake cops. It was bureaucratic warfare. Owen's lights flickered. He checked the panel. Nothing. He walked outside. The junction box for the power lines that served his house ran across the small, grassy strip between his boundary and the common area. He heard the roar of an engine. A flatbed truck, unmarked but clearly hired by the HOA, had parked near the common area. Two men in neon vests were digging aggressively near the power pedestal with a backhoe. Owen sprinted toward them. Hey, what are you doing? You're digging up my power line easement. The foreman, a heavy man chewing tobacco, didn't look up. HOA hired us. Emergency utility review. Said the line runs across common property and is unsafe. We're cutting it and rerouting the entire feed per the new plan. You can't, Owen yelled, pointing toward his house. That's my primary feed. You'll shut off my power. Already tagged and cut, the foreman replied with a sickening smirk. Board order. You have generator power, I assume? They left you 48 hours to reestablish service to the house. Good luck. Owen stood there, watching the man sever the line. The morning sun rose not over a tranquil suburban street, but over a battlefield defined by a single, taut line of fluorescent orange tape. The 2-foot-tall mahogany sign Owen had planted glittered under the dew, announcing its stark message to every passing resident, every mail carrier, and every terrified HOA staff member. The black lettering was formal, simple, and devastatingly effective. Notice to trespasser. This property line enforced 4 feet of this structure is illegally occupying lot 14 proceeding B49. Filed in county court access beyond this point is prohibited by order of the owner, Owen Riley. The effect was instantaneous. The sign, placed squarely in the middle of the HOA's former front yard, meant that the gold-plated office door was now marooned on a 4-foot island of legally disputed territory. To enter, one had to either vault the orange tape or trespass across Owen's legally claimed land. The first staff member to arrive, a nervous young woman named Kelly, drove past the office 3 times before pulling over. She stared at the sign, then the tape, then the front door that was now entirely inaccessible. She finally called a supervisor in a panic, eventually having to use the muddy, overgrown back entrance near the dumpster pad. Dragging her work bag through the weeds, by 7 a.m., a small crowd of homeowners had gathered, sipping coffee and whispering behind cupped hands. Owen watched from his porch, the sight of the chaos providing a powerful balm for the fear and rage he felt over the power cut. He had purchased a large industrial-grade generator, the rhythmic roar of which now mocked the dark. Silent HOA office. The real show began at 7:30, when a black Mercedes-Benz, pristine and imposing, screeched to a halt at the curb. Vivian Holloway exploded from the driver's side, her face a mask of scarlet fury. She saw the sign, and for a terrifying moment, Owen thought she might have a stroke. "Riley!" she shrieked, her voice tearing through the morning quiet. She stomped toward the sign, her expensive leather flats coming dangerously close to the orange tape. "You deranged lunatic! You can't do this! This is a common area! This is interference!" Owen walked down his driveway, stopping just past his legitimate property line, maintaining a careful distance. He pointed at the sign. "It's a legally filed notice of trespass, Vivian. That 4 feet is mine. You have a choice. Respect the boundary and use your back door like the squatter you are, or commit another act of civil disobedience. Choose wisely, because every action you take is now evidence." Vivian's perfectly manicured hand went straight for the orange tape, poised to rip it down. She hesitated, her eyes flickering to the homeowners watching from the curb, smartphones raised like small digital weapons. She knew tearing down the sign would look petty and aggressive, confirming every suspicion they already harbored. "You think this ridiculous stunt changes anything?" She spat, her voice tight with venom. I had my attorneys file a countersuit this morning. We're seeking immediate removal of this trash, an injunction against you for creating a public hazard, and an astronomical penalty for the financial losses of a business interruption. We will bankrupt you, Riley. You won't just lose your house. You'll lose your clothes. You cut off my power, Vivian, Owen countered, letting the raw emotion into his voice for the first time. You hired fake police to terrorize my home. You are the aggressor. You are the hazard. I'll see you in court. He turned and walked back toward his humming generator. At precisely 11 a.m., a heavy-duty landscaping truck, conspicuously marked Fast and Final Demolitions, backed up to the curb. Two young men in hard hats, sweating in the heat, began to unload a jackhammer and several lengths of chain. Vivian rushed out of the back door, her tailored jacket discarded, replaced by a tense white blouse. She gestured wildly at the area where the sign stood. Get that tape and that sign out of here! I don't care how, just remove it. That's impeding access. We need a clean path. The foreman, a taciturn man with a clipboard, looked at the sign, then at the HOA office wall. He noticed the corner survey pin in the asphalt. Ma'am, the work order says remove debris and obstructions from the common area. This sign and tape are clearly marked as a property line marker under B49. If we cross that tape and touch that sign, that's criminal trespass, and we could be liable for contempt of court based on that filing number. It's my property line, Vivian screeched. Ma'am, the owner of Lot 14 says it's his. We're not getting in the middle of a boundary dispute, the foreman said, shrugging. He pointed at the utility pedestal where the power line was still severed. We're here to reroute the sprinkler system like the HOA requested. Vivian glared at the foreman, then back at Owen's house. She was boxed in. Her utility company refused to restore power until the owner of the land, Owen, signed off, citing the open boundary dispute. Her staff was demoralized. Her neighbors were gossiping. And her hired muscle wouldn't cross a piece of orange tape for fear of a contempt citation. Fine, Vivian yelled, snatching the foreman's clipboard. Leave the tape. Leave the sign. But I want this entire area paved over, right up to that fence. We'll use the back door permanently. Turn this front area into a concrete slab. Make it impossible for anyone to stand there. The foreman nodded. Paving up to the existing fence line, ma'am, got it. That'll be a 2-day job. Vivian was attempting to create an estoppel defense by making a permanent, costly structural improvement to the disputed area, daring Owen to stop her. She was sacrificing her front access and spending thousands of dollars just to spite him. The emergency injunction hearing was held. 48 hours later. Courtroom. 3 was a place of beige marble and intimidating silence. Owen sat beside Elias Vance, who looked like a well-dressed predator about to corner his prey. Across the aisle, Vivian Holloway was rigidly composed, flanked by her 2 high-priced corporate lawyers, Mr. Thompson and Ms. Patel, who radiated expensive, weary disdain. Vivian's team, speaking first, tried to dismiss Owen's actions as the antics of a vexatious, disgruntled former neighbor who fabricated a historical survey to harass the HOA after receiving legitimate fines. Mr. Thompson stood, tall and gray, addressing the judge. Your Honor, Mr. Riley has illegally erected barriers and signage on communal property, disrupting the essential services of the HOA. He is attempting to exert undue influence on a common area through intimidation, based on a single, unverified, handwritten note from the 1950s. We ask for an immediate order to remove the barriers and restore the HOA's access. Vance rose slowly, adjusting his tie. He didn't rush. Your Honor, Mr. Riley is not the plaintiff in this emergency hearing. He is the victim. The plaintiff in the underlying action, the quiet title, is my client, Mr. Riley. The defendant is the Stonebrook Ridge Association. My client is not disrupting access. He is defending his property rights as recorded by the county. Vance walked to the evidence stand, where he placed the original 1952 plat, Thomas Riley's Addendum A, and the new independent survey report, all certified. He let the documents speak for themselves. The evidence is clear, Your Honor. The HOA office, the seat of the defendant's alleged authority, is trespassing 4 feet onto my client's land. In response to being served with this undeniable legal truth, the defendant, under the direction of Ms. Holloway, took 3 retaliatory, malicious actions against my client in 48 hours. Vance's voice took on a low, serious tone. First, the dispatch of 2 armed civilian thugs in fake tactical gear, impersonating code enforcement officers, threatening forcible, illegal eviction at 6 a.m. We have the 911 call log and the sheriff's report. Ms. Patel jumped up. Objection, Your Honor. Irrelevant to the boundary dispute. It is entirely relevant to the plaintiff's pattern of malicious behavior, Your Honor, Vance countered smoothly. Second, the immediate targeted severing of my client's primary electrical utility line during the boundary dispute. A retaliatory act of violence against property. He paused, letting the severity of the charge sink in. Third, when my client legally exercised his right to mark his boundary, the defendant immediately contracted a construction crew to pave over the disputed land, an act designed to permanently impede my client's legal remedy and fabricate an estoppel defense during a pending court action. Vance turned and faced Vivian, who stared back with cold, rigid defiance. We are not seeking to harass the HOA, Your Honor. We are seeking to halt a pattern of criminal-level behavior and abuse of power that began with a fraudulent eviction attempt and culminated in the malicious denial of essential services, he finished with a powerful plea. We ask for a mandatory, immediate injunction. 1, to restore utility service to Lot 14. And 2, to prohibit the defendant from any further construction, demolition, or interference with the boundary and its markers until the quiet title action is resolved. She can use the back door. Her power is not worth more than my client's fundamental human right to electricity and the sanctity of his property. The judge, an elderly woman with sharp, skeptical eyes, leaned forward. She looked at Vivian. Ms. Holloway, is it true your office is currently only accessible via the back entrance? Vivian swallowed, her composure finally breaking. We have a temporary setback, Your Honor. It's a technicality. I see no technicality in the new survey, Ms. Holloway, the judge interrupted, her voice snapping like a whip. I see a structure built on land that appears by ancient. The 6 hours stipulated by the judge felt like 60 minutes to Owen. By the late afternoon, the utility truck returned, dispatched by the HOA under explicit, court-ordered threat of financial penalty. The repair crew, operating with a palpable sense of urgency and resentment, restored power to Lot 14. When the lights flickered back on in Owen's home, it was more than just electricity. It was the warmth of victory. Meanwhile, the HOA office had become a public spectacle. The back entrance, a narrow, often muddy path that wound past the overflowing recycling bins and led to a rusting fire exit, was now the sole portal to Vivian Holloway's diminished kingdom. Homeowners, usually terrified of HOA scrutiny, drove slowly past the site, honking or leaning out of windows to capture photos of the absurd tableau, the gold-plated sign in front, the orange tape of exclusion, and the sight of Vivian's impeccably dressed staff shuffling meekly through the refuse area. Vivian herself was a caged animal. The injunction had secured her defeat, forcing her into physical confinement on the common ground she so jealously guarded. She issued a flurry of emergency notices, attempting to fine Owen for unsightly boundary markers and excessive use of an industrial generator, but the authority was gone. The notices were laughed off by the residents, and Vance simply filed them under future punitive damages evidence. 2 days after the injunction, the narrative shifted from civil property rights to criminal consequence. Detective Reyes from the county prosecutor's office called Owen. Mr. Riley, I'm reviewing the sheriff's report regarding the 2 individuals who attempted to forcibly enter your home. Impersonation of law enforcement, attempted home invasion, felony coercion, these are serious charges. We've managed to trace the Black Utility Vest Company back to a private security firm in the next county. They're claiming they were hired for a civil compliance matter. By Vivian Holloway? Owen asked, his voice tight. By the Stonebrook Ridge Association, specifically a purchase order signed by the board president, Ms. Holloway, authorizing a non-judicial eviction procedure. That phrase alone is highly incriminating. They essentially signed a purchase order for a crime. Reyes's voice was grim. We're interviewing the 2 men now. They're facing immediate charges, and they're singing like canaries about Ms. Holloway's direct instructions and her promise to cover their legal fees. We'll be needing your testimony. The criminal element was the final weight that crushed Vivian's corporate armor. Her high-priced corporate attorneys, Thompson and Patel, saw the writing on the wall. They dealt in tax code and bylaws, not felony defense. Vance called Owen later that day. "They're running, Owen." Thompson and Patel filed a motion to withdraw as counsel for the association, citing irreconcilable differences and ethical conflicts. They aren't going to defend a civil suit that's about to turn into a criminal conspiracy case. What does that mean for Vivian? It means she's about to be served a massive contempt motion for the power cut. She's losing her legal shield, and she's facing the board alone. They're going to sacrifice her. The board members don't want their names on a criminal subpoena. The emergency meeting of the Stonebrook Ridge Association Board of Directors was held that evening. Not in the compromised trespassing office, but in the spacious, neutral living room of board treasurer Malcolm Davies. Malcolm, a man whose entire personality was built around actuarial tables and risk mitigation, sat at the head of a mahogany dining table, his face pale and set. Vivian sat opposite him, attempting to maintain her icy composure, but the exhaustion and panic showed in the strained set of her mouth. "Vivian, let's dispense with the pleasantries," Malcolm began, his voice flat with professional dread. "The association has been served with 2 subpoenas. One from Mr. Riley's attorney regarding punitive damages for trespass, and one from the county prosecutor's office regarding the attempted illegal eviction. Furthermore, Thompson and Patel have abandoned us." Vivian leaned forward, her eyes blazing. "They are cowards, Malcolm. We can hire new counsel, better counsel. Riley's entire claim rests on a brittle piece of paper from the 50s. This is a simple property squabble, and we are right. We have the right of adverse possession." "No, we don't." Malcolm slammed his palm on the table, making the crystal glasses jump. "We just paid a $3,000 fine for contempt of court, and a $5,000 utility restoration fee, plus the emergency paving costs you authorized, which are now completely useless because of the injunction. We are bleeding the reserve fund. Our insurance carrier is refusing to indemnify us for the criminal actions you initiated. Adverse possession? We can't claim adverse possession when the original deed holder, Thomas Riley, filed an addendum preserving his interest before the statute of limitations ran out. Our legal position is not right, Vivian. It is indefensible." Another board member, Janice, spoke up, her voice shaky. "My daughter saw you directing those men in the tactical gear, Vivian. You told them to execute the protocol. If I'm subpoenaed, I will tell the truth. I will not lose my house because you got into a personal feud with Mr. Riley over an azalea bush." The board secretary, David, adjusted his glasses, his hands trembling as he held up a balance sheet. "The cost to defend this civil suit, once punitive damages are factored in, and trust me, they will be massive, plus the inevitable cost of tearing down and relocating the office building. Vivian, we're looking at a $500,000 special assessment. We will destroy this community to defend your personal vendetta." Malcolm looked at Vivian, his eyes cold and final. "The board held an emergency confidential vote an hour ago, Vivian. Effective immediately, you are removed from the position of board president. You are relieved of all signing and management authority. We need to hire a crisis management firm and cut our losses before the prosecutor charges the entire board." Vivian didn't scream or cry. She merely smiled, a terrifying, brittle expression of absolute defeat and utter detachment. "You think this protects you, Malcolm? You think you can fire me and this all goes away?" The board signed off on the development agreement that illegally sited that building 20 years ago. "You are all complicit!" She stood up, pushing her chair back with a violence that made the crystal glasses rattle. "You can remove me from the board, but you can't remove the problem. That building, your headquarters, still trespasses. And once Riley wins his quiet title, he will have the legal right to demand its total, immediate demolition. Good luck explaining that special assessment to the community, Malcolm." She turned and stalked out, the heavy front door of Malcolm's house closing behind her with the sound of a period being hammered onto a damning sentence. The next morning, Owen woke up to silence. The usual suburban noise, garbage trucks, sprinklers, distant traffic, was absent. He checked his generator. It was off. He walked outside feeling a deep, unsettling quiet. The utility line, he knew, was now legally restored, so the silence was not a power cut. He walked around the corner toward the HOA office. The orange tape was still in place. The sign still stood defiant. The office windows were dark and the back door was shut, but the silence was coming from something else. In the center of the asphalt parking lot next to the curb, a single, deep, square hole had been dug. A massive industrial-grade backhoe sat abandoned nearby, its bucket resting on the newly exposed dirt. Vivian Holloway, now stripped of her power and facing criminal charges, had spent the night performing a final, catastrophic act of pure spite. She hadn't attacked Owen's property. She had attacked the only thing she had left, the infrastructure of the common area. A police cruiser was already on the scene, its lights flashing silently. Officer Chen was talking to a bewildered city engineer who was standing at the edge of the pit. Owen walked up to the edge of the hole. The city engineer pointed down into the newly excavated cavity. "She used her keycard to rent this backhoe last night right after being fired," the engineer explained, shaking his head in disbelief. "She was trying to remove the corner pin and destroy the survey evidence, maybe damage the sprinkler system out of spite. But she misjudged the depth. The pit was a foot wider and 2 feet deeper than necessary, and in the center of the pit, now entirely exposed and fractured by the backhoe, was the neighborhood's main sewer artery. The sewer main for the entire Stonebrook Ridge community," Officer Chen finished grimly. "She hit it hard enough to cause a catastrophic fracture. They're shutting off water to 3 sections of the community now. She just declared war on every single resident." Owen looked from the severed sewer line to the dark, trespassing office building, then back toward the street where residents were starting to gather, yelling about brown water and shut-off notices. Vivian Holloway had started a war over 4 feet of land and ended it by destroying the essential utilities for the entire development. She hadn't just lost the fight. She had drowned her entire kingdom in the consequences of her rage. The true final irony had arrived.